Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm going to need a tape of that for my mother. I want to start by, really, thank you so much. I want to thank and congratulate President Hamilton, Dean Gleed, the entire faculty and staff. As you heard, I got to spend the last semester here at Wagner and got to know a few of you. And I've also been lucky enough to work with dozens of Wagner graduates over my career, including my current and former chiefs of staff. So to the faculty, you are doing something right. And I know how lucky you are to work with these students every day. Second, I want to say congratulations to all of the families here. You'll give a round of applause to everyone's families. I know that the joy you feel as you bask in love and pride is exceeded only by the joy of not having to pay any tuition. So I want to congratulate you. And finally, and most importantly, congratulations to the Wagner class of 2019. So I am sorry to say I will not be agreeing to pay off your loans today. But if you need to borrow like $5 or $10, I mean, I got you after the ceremony. So it's very stressful to do a speech like this. It's a lot of pressure. It's a very important day in your lives. I asked a friend what I should talk about today, and she said, whatever you do, do not repeat a bunch of cliches. People already know they're supposed to follow their hearts and to dream big. Don't be a Hallmark card, she said. But I thought about this, but I was thinking, what's wrong with cliches? Presumably, phrases have become cliches because they're worth repeating over and over again, and after all, Hallmark is a $4 billion company for a reason. So as you pursue your careers and lives in public service, I'd like to share a few cliches that you have undoubtedly heard before, but that have nonetheless served me well. The cliches are, follow your heart, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and finally, dream big. So first, follow your heart. As you heard, I was born in East New York, Brooklyn. It's a community where, East New York in the house? All right, always. East New York, Brooklyn is a community where more than 70% of children are born into poverty, and fewer than 10% graduate from college. My parents made sure I had a great education, but unfortunately, that meant not attending my local neighborhood public schools. I tested into Stuyvesant High School. It was my first time going to school with kids who weren't all black and brown and who didn't come from Brooklyn neighborhoods like Bushwick and Bed-Stuy. Of course, I mean the old Bushwick and Bed-Stuy, not the current Bushwick and Bed-Stuy. This was a very difficult experience for me, as it is for lots of young people in the same position. I struggled, not academically so much, as mentally and socially. And as I rode the subway every day from East New York to Stuyvesant, I realized for the first time that there were really two New York cities. There was a New York City where kids were expected to succeed and were given the tools to do so. But there was this whole other New York, the one where I grew up, the New York of economic inequality and the school-to-prison pipeline. I developed a few syndromes at Stuyvesant: imposter syndrome, survivor syndrome, but more than anything else, I developed anger. I was angry because I knew that the kids in my old New York weren't any different than the kids in this new New York, at least not in any way that should matter. For a while, I didn't know what to do with that anger, but that changed for me in college. As a freshman, I started tutoring in an after-school program in the Mission Hill Public Housing Projects in Roxbury, Boston. Now, I started because a woman who I had a crush on asked me to volunteer. That is not what I mean when I say to follow your heart. And as it turned out, I did not get the girl. But I got something even better. I started volunteering once a week, and then it was twice a week. And by the end of my freshman year, I was in Roxbury 3 days a week and every Saturday. I loved it. I loved it. I felt at home there in a way that I rarely felt on campus. And when I came back to college after a summer back here in New York City, I cannot wait to return to the young people of the Mission Hill houses. I asked the kids how their summers went, only to find out that most of them had done nothing with their summers, hanging out, watching television. Here was another group of talented black and brown kids, being denied opportunity. Apparently, there are 2 Bostons as well. So I decided to do something about it. A few friends and I started the Mission Hill Summer Program. We got the Boston Housing Authority to give us an apartment so we could live in the development and be close to the kids all summer. We read books with the kids. We read the autobiography of Malcolm X and great books. We took them on field trips. We went camping. Nothing more fun than taking a bunch of hardcore Boston Housing Project kids camping. We put on dance performances. The right stage for it. Maybe later I'll show you a couple moves. We took week-long trips to New York and Washington, D.C. I truly found my calling in Mission Hill. And it wasn't just because I loved working with those kids, although I did love working with the kids. It was because I found a way to channel my anger into something positive. It thrilled me that you could see a problem, a group of young people that I cared about who were denied opportunity, and you could actually do something about it. I decided that I wanted to do that for a living. The problem is I didn't know how to do that for a living. So I did what generations of young college graduates do when they don't know what to do with their lives. I went to law school. Maybe this sounds familiar to some of you. So fast forward a few years, I'm a young civil rights lawyer at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU, representing community groups fighting petrochemical facilities that were being sited in poor neighborhoods in rural Louisiana. Spent a lot of time visiting these communities, interviewing activists, and talking about their work, and I realized I was much more interested in what they were doing than what I was doing. Even though being a civil rights lawyer is important, I was not following my heart. A few months into my time at the Brennan Center, I had the opportunity to start an organization that would tackle another important problem. I knew from my own life the transformative impact that a college degree can have. And I also knew how critical it is to have a knowledgeable mentor to guide you down that path. But I also know that too few, low-income young people have access to that kind of mentoring and guidance. Certainly, too few young people in East New York and Roxbury do. So 10 months into my legal career, I left the Brennan Center. In fact, I left the law altogether to start a nonprofit called iMentor. So this was very scary, because not only was I not on the law firm path like most of my classmates, I wasn't even on a legal path. What if I failed? What would I learn? Who's going to hire me? And God forbid, what if I had to be a lawyer again? Everything in my brain told me that leaving the Brennan Center to start iMentor was a terrible idea. But my heart told me that leaving Brennan to start iMentor, that my 17-year-old self would never forgive me if I didn't leap at the chance. So I followed my heart, and 20 years later, iMentor has matched nearly 35,000 students with mentors in 3 cities around the country, with our 4th city, Baltimore, opening next year. And our students are 80% more likely to complete college than their peers. Proof that anything is possible when you follow your heart. My second cliche, it is not what you know, it is who you know. This sounds a little bit more nefarious, but I promise I mean it in a good way. What I mean by that is that Taylor Swift was onto something when she talked about it's all about your squad. I really don't even understand that reference, but I'm glad that you do. So going back to iMentor, we got started because there was a hedge fund manager in New York who had the idea of using the internet to connect young people with volunteer mentors, and he wanted to find someone to turn this idea into an actual program and organization. So the hedge fund manager mentioned it to one of his analysts, who mentioned it to his brother, who mentioned it to our mutual friend Matt, who mentioned it to me. And through these 4 degrees of separation, iMentor was born. So serendipity, of course, but except it wasn't really serendipity. I first met Matt when I was in college. He was working another summer camp in another housing project while I was working in the Mission Hill program. He's one of my close friends for a bunch of reasons, but the biggest is because we share so many of the same values. We both grew up working class. We both grew up committed to justice. He throws really good parties. I like to go to really good parties. So when you find people like that, people that you share values with, you have to keep them close. We have since co-founded 2 organizations together. We eventually joined the de Blasio administration together, and he's the godfather of my oldest son. In every endeavor, I have learned that the single most important indicator of success is whether you are surrounded by good people. Another member of my squad is my wife. We met in law school, And the minute I saw her, I knew I needed to keep her close as well. She's a civil rights lawyer. She's a professor at NYU School of Law. She's a board member of the ACLU, former chair of the city's Civilian Complaint Review Board, a writer, and an advocate. This brilliant woman has indulged in my every professional whim, providing me with great advice, deep inspiration, and unconditional love. I also think of all the mentors I have learned from, all the colleagues I have worked with, the friends I have laughed and cried with, and the simple truth of the matter is that anything I have ever done that was worth doing, I did with others. LBJ once said, "There are no problems we cannot solve together, and very few that we can solve by ourselves." It really is all about who you know. If you're lucky enough, you get to meet some amazing people in this life, and if you're smart enough, you keep them close. Now, we know you are all lucky because you have spent the last few years getting to know some of the most committed, intelligent, fierce, righteously angry people in the world. Now you just have to be smart. Keep each other close. My third and final cliche is dream big. So as you heard, in 2012, I was starting my 5th year as a CEO of the Children's Aid Society, a job that I loved. Now, a few years earlier, I should say, I had met then public advocate Bill de Blasio and his wife, Charlene McRae, on an educational trip to Israel. We stayed in touch, and he eventually got elected mayor. His signature campaign promise had been to launch pre-K for all, to provide every 4-year-old in New York City with free, full-day, high-quality pre-K, and to build the program in a year and a half. So to my surprise, the mayor asked me to join the administration to make this promise a reality. So I did what any rational person would do when faced with such an extraordinary opportunity. I said no. Now, when I talk about why I say no, the story I usually tell is that I said no because it was so impractical. Not only did I already have a great job that I loved, but at the time I was living in the suburbs, and to take the job, I would have to move back to New York City. That meant selling our house, taking our children out of their schools, away from their friends, moving away from the community my wife and I and our kids had made in New Rochelle, and as a bonus, I would get to take a massive pay cut. Now, that story is all true. I had real anxiety about all of those things, especially the impact I knew that it would have on my family. But if I went deeper, I would tell you that I wasn't sure that pulling off full-day universal pre-K in a year and a half was possible at all. So when Mayor took office, there were 19,000 kids in full-day pre-K. He promised that by that September, there'd be 54,000 kids. And by the next September, there'd be at least 70,000 seats, enough for any family who wanted one for their 4-year-old. We were basically adding an entire grade to the system in a year and a half, a grade that would be bigger than the entire school districts of San Antonio or San Francisco or Boston. It just seemed impossible. But the truth is, if I went all the way deep, the biggest reason I said no was not because I thought it could not be done. I said no because I didn't think that I could do it. What the hell did I know about building a pre-K system in America's biggest city, or about being a deputy mayor? So with regret, I said no. So one day, about a month after he took office, I got a call asking me to come in and to see the mayor. So I came to City Hall. I don't usually get those calls. So he wanted to see me that night, so I went to City Hall. The mayor and the first lady were there, which was the first sign something was amiss, and it turned out they had not taken my prior, actually 2 no's, very seriously. They talked again about how this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They were laying it on thick, and I was weakening, and I said at a certain point in the conversation, I said, look, you all have to stop. This is great. You are talking to the wrong person. This is my wife's decision, not mine. The mayor said, oh, sounds like my family. So he invited my wife and I to Gracie Mansion the next night. So the next night he hosted, the first lady and the mayor hosted my wife and I in this ornate dining room at Gracie Mansion. Now again, I do not frequently have dinner at Gracie with the mayor of New York City. Kind of a big deal. And so again, after dinner, as my wife and I were making our way back to Westchester, I looked at her and said, are we actually gonna do this? And she was like, yeah, I think we're gonna do this. At the end of the day, I had to ask myself again, what would 17-year-old Rich do? Now, I don't want to sugarcoat this. This was the most stressful period in my life by far. I stopped eating. I could not sleep for months. The work was fiendishly complicated. The hours were long, the stakes were high. I felt tremendous guilt about the sacrifices I knew my family was making. I had to deal with some really rough politicians and some even rougher reporters. It is not always easy to dream big. And by the way, I was still 100% sure that I was going to fail, and that the world would finally find out what I was pretty sure of since the 9th grade, that they'd find out that I was a complete fraud. You know, so many of us say no to opportunities because we refuse to dream big about solving the world's problems. But I think even more of us say no to opportunities because we refuse to think big about our capacity to solve those problems. We know that the most common way for people to give up their power is by thinking they do not have any. But we did it. We made pre-K for all happen and on schedule. And every day I get to walk around the city and I see these big, beautiful posters that say, pre-K for all is offered here. I finally stopped pointing them out to my son so that they would go outside with me. But you know, pre-K for all worked because thousands of New Yorkers, city employees from places like the fire department and the building department, teachers and nonprofit leaders, elected officials and advocates, parents and philanthropists, all came together and decided that we were going to do something big for this city together. So shortly after I started at City Hall, I went to talk to a former city senior official that I knew, just to share my anxieties about taking on this role. He asked if I had read Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech. I hadn't. I have now read it many times since. If you have not, I suggest that you read it. In his speech, Roosevelt said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man or woman," he didn't say the woman part, "the man or woman who is in the arena, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." You know, there is so much to be angry about in this world. You know, I say if you are not angry, you are not paying attention. But the beautiful thing is that we can do more than be angry. We can do something with our anger. We can solve problems for the people we love. We can make our world a more just place. But to do that, we need you in the arena. We need you to dare greatly, to dare together. There is no guarantee that you will succeed. Sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes the problems persist. The arc of the universe does not always bend in the right direction. But I believe with all my heart that if you follow your heart, if you keep good people close, and if you dream big, the future has a fighting chance. Thank you for listening to me, and once again, congratulations to the class of 2019.